I've been married to my husband for 8 years, and for the most part, I thought we had a stable and happy life. We have a 6-year-old son who is very important to me. I work as a pediatric nurse at a major hospital in our city, which means I have long hours, especially on weekends. My husband is a corporate lawyer at a prestigious firm, and his job also keeps him busy. My son called her mother while I was working a weekend shift. He was busy, so I assumed we were just like any other couple balancing work, parenting, and marriage. However, 3 weeks ago, everything changed in my life. It began on a Saturday when I was supposed to work a 12-hour shift, but because of staffing changes, I was released early, which was a rare treat. I didn't tell my husband I would be home early, thinking I would surprise him and our son, who had been requesting more mommy time lately, and I was thrilled to. When I pulled into the driveway at around 2:00 p.m., I wanted to spend the extra hours with him. When I saw a strange car parked in front of our house, I initially gave it a lot of thought because my husband occasionally had coworkers over for work, even on the weekends. However, as I approached the door, I heard a woman's laughter mixed with my son's giggles, which made my heart sink. I tried to ignore the emotion, telling myself it was there was a woman, probably in her early 30s, sitting on the floor with my son, surrounded by his toys, wearing my apron as though she had been cooking. My husband was sitting on the couch, looking relaxed, as if this was just another Saturday afternoon. But it wasn't for me. My son ran over to me, but instead of his usual mommy, he said something that hit me like a punch to the heart. I was shocked by what I saw when I opened the door. My husband jumped up, obviously taken aback by my arrival, and stammered something about how Sarah, yes Sarah, his so-called work wife, was temporarily staying with us due to problems with her apartment. He mentioned water damage and insurance issues, but I wasn't listening. All I could think about was the scene in front of me. He was talking about this woman, this unfamiliar person, as if she were his spouse. The person I loved the most, my son, was acting as though she were a member of our family. Then I noticed the suitcases, which were partially concealed behind the couch, but I could see enough to understand what was happening. These weren't suitcases packed for a brief visit. Rather, they were unpacked with women's and Sarah's clothing hanging out. I felt as though I was in a daze, and I couldn't even recall what I said next, but I do remember that I went upstairs to our bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and my spouse followed me as I began packing my belongings and tried to explain, but his words barely registered. He kept saying that I was overreacting and that Sarah's situation was temporary, but nothing made sense to me anymore. How long had this been going on? How long had this coworker been in my home, stepping into a role that wasn't hers? My husband was unaware that 2 weeks prior, I had already discovered something suspicious when I was searching his office for some tax documents and came across a folder full of. The worst part was the emails between him and Sarah discussing their plans. I had taken pictures of everything and planned to confront him after my shift that weekend, but I never expected to find her in my house when I came home early. There were bank statements that showed regular transfers to an unknown account going back almost a year, as well as documents about a property purchase that I knew nothing about. He stood there attempting to persuade me that I was being unreasonable, but I had already decided that I couldn't continue living in a house where my husband had been leading a double life, and I most definitely wasn't going to let my son be involved. My son was crying and confused as I got him into the car, and he kept asking why we couldn't stay with our real mother any longer. Every word felt like a knife in my heart. How had this happened? How had my husband allowed this woman to get so close to our son that he didn't even know who his real mother was anymore? I didn't go far at first. Instead of going to the hotel as I had planned, I drove to my mother-in-law's house because I needed someone to talk to, and we had always had a good relationship. I also knew that she had experienced something similar with my husband's father years prior, so when I got to her house, I broke down and showed her the documents I had found, including the property purchase agreement, the bank statements, and The woman's face changed from shock to anger as she went through the emails between my husband and Sarah, and then she revealed to me something that made matters worse. The property my husband had bought with Sarah wasn't just any property. It was bought with funds from his trust fund, which was established for our family with strict guidelines about how the money could be used. The betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks because not only had he been seeing someone else behind my back, but he had also used money intended for our child's future to build a life with someone else. The next few days were a blur as I checked into a hotel with my son, paying in cash so my husband couldn't track me. I contacted a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who was known for handling high-profile cases discreetly. I also filed for emergency custody of my son, documenting everything I had learned about how my husband had used money meant for our family to build a life with her. My mother-in-law was furious, and I could see the pain in her eyes when she realized what her son had done. As the days went by, messages from my husband and his friends began to pour in. They all said the same thing. I was being unfair, I was overreacting, and I shouldn't take our son away from his father because of a mistake. Some of them even accused me of trying to turn my mother-in-law against him by using her to get what I wanted. Sarah and my husband had encouraged my son to call her his real mommy, and the financial deception and emotional manipulation had been going on behind my back. I know I'm not wrong. I know that as a mother, I have to protect my son from people who would manipulate him and from a father who has shown he cares more about his affair than his family. However, because of all the pressure, sometimes I ask myself if I'm being too harsh or if I know what I've been through. They didn't understand what it was like to come home and find another woman living in your home, playing mother to your child, and most likely a partner to your husband. I don't know the answer, and perhaps I never will, but I know that I have to stand up for my son's future and my well-being, so I can't help but wonder if I'm wrong for doing this. Should I have given my husband another chance? Should I have given him an explanation? How can I forgive someone who has destroyed the trust we've built over 8 years? How can I continue to be married to someone I don't even know? Who is my husband anymore? The fallout from my visit to my mother-in-law happened more quickly than I had anticipated. I had assumed it would take some time, but she wasted no time at all. After I gave her those documents, she went straight to the administrators of the trust fund and showed them the evidence of what my husband had done for some of you who were asking about this. I know that the trust fund wasn't something you could spend freely, but it was meant to have strict guidelines about what it could be used for, family responsibilities like providing for our son's necessities. But using that money to purchase a home with his affair partner went too far. As soon as the administrators saw the documents, they froze the entire trust fund, locking up every penny until they could conduct an additional investigation. Due to legal requirements, my husband's law firm also had to be notified, which created a whole new issue. He and Sarah had been working together for some time, but they had never disclosed this to HR. The firm began its investigation into their relationship, which was against company policy because they were involved and working in the same office. I could tell from the way things were going that my husband's career was now in jeopardy. On my end, my attorney moved quickly. Within days of filing for emergency custody, I was granted a temporary order that gave me primary custody of our son. The judge was extremely concerned about the situation, particularly when I presented them with proof that my husband had pushed my son to call someone else mommy. The judge stated that this was a clear example of parental alienation, and considering my son's age, it was a serious issue. The court could see that my son was being manipulated, which greatly favored me. In the meantime, my husband was constantly phoning and texting, and one minute he was furious, accusing me of exaggerating the situation, and the next he was pleading for me to come home and fix everything. He insisted that Sarah was just a friend who was helping him because she was having issues with her apartment, and that purchasing the property together was solely a business transaction. However, I had seen the bank transfers, the documents, and the emails, and I knew that they weren't just investing in a property. They were planning a future together that didn't include me. As if that wasn't enough, friends and family began contacting me as well. People kept calling and messaging me to express how upset my husband was about being away from our son. They said he was heartbroken, missing his little boy, and that the separation was causing him to fall into a deep emotional state. However, the more I thought about it, the more I noticed something odd. He never once mentioned our son in any of his calls or messages to me. Instead, he focused all of his texts on how unfair it was to him, and he never mentioned missing bedtime. I had spent years trusting him, believing he was always doing what was best for our family. I had been so busy working long shifts and taking care of everything at home that I had missed the signs, and now I couldn't help but feel that he had checked out of our marriage long before I ever realized it. Whether it was telling stories or playing with our son in the mornings, it seemed like he was more concerned about how things affected him than what this whole situation was doing to our child. The investigation into the trust fund continued, and according to my lawyer, it didn't look good for my husband because if it turned out that he had misused the money, he could face serious legal consequences. The trust wasn't just some casual fund that he could dip into whenever he wanted. It had very specific rules about how the money could be used. He had been gradually building a life without me, making plans behind my back, and involving our son in those plans without my knowledge. My mother-in-law had been in a similar situation with my husband's father years prior, and I believe that seeing her son follow those footsteps hurt her deeply. Things at his law firm weren't going well either, and the internal investigation revealed their relationship. Purchasing a house with his affair partner was not on that list, and my mother-in-law was furious when she found out, not just because of the money, but because he had been dishonest with all of us. Despite everything, there were times when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing and whether it was fair to keep my son away from his father. After all that had happened, there were times when I saw my son's face light up during the supervised visits with his dad, and I was told that it was a big deal because his job was now on the line and that he was on indefinite leave while they decided what to do with his career, which he had worked so hard for, now in jeopardy due to his own choices. That tugged at my heart. They still shared a bond. Despite my best efforts to shield my son from the pain and confusion of this whole situation, I couldn't deny that my husband was still his father. Seeing them together, even during those brief, supervised visits, made me wonder if I was being too harsh or if I was punishing my husband in a way that would also affect my son. However, then I would recall everything my husband had done, including the lies, deceit, and his attempts to replace me in our son's life. I knew deep down that I wasn't wrong for wanting to protect my child and that I wasn't the one who had broken our family, but it was difficult to avoid feeling the pressure from everyone around me. My husband began telling people that I was turning his mother against him and that I was making it impossible for him to rebuild his relationship with our family. However, life would pass, and I would feel more confident in my decision then. He attempted to fabricate a story in which he was the victim, and I could see that some people were beginning to believe it. They believed that I was being too harsh and cold, and that perhaps I should just let things go for the sake of our child. However, whenever I began to question myself, I would consider what kind of example I wanted to set for my son. I wanted him to understand that it was acceptable to stand up for yourself and to expect respect, even from those you care about most. I wasn't going to let my husband's poor choices cause any more harm. As he continued to lose control of his career and finances, I concentrated on what mattered, keeping my son safe and providing him with the stability he needed during this chaotic time. Update 2. My husband's company has gotten much worse. What started as an investigation into his relationship with Sarah has grown into something much bigger, and more employees have started coming forward with concerns about my husband, as well as Sarah's inappropriate behavior at office events. They were unprofessional and frequently argued, and people noticed they were becoming too close at company retreats and work parties. The most serious allegations involve favoritism, which came from several employees who said Sarah was being given preference for partnership consideration, despite having far less experience than others. This reflected poorly, especially since she and my husband never disclosed their relationship to HR. Both my husband and Sarah have been placed on administrative leave while the firm investigates everything. My attorney has been able to obtain information from HR that is helping with my case, which is something the firm is also concerned about. This violated company policy because my husband had a lot of influence over case assignments, and it became evident that Sarah was receiving the most desirable ones, the kinds that could significantly benefit her career. Many other associates were frustrated but remained silent until the investigation began. On the family front, my mother-in-law has been a surprising source of support. I never imagined we'd be this close given the circumstances, but she has been there for me and my son every step of the way. Legal issues also arose because some client funds were tied to the property my husband and Sarah purchased together. The HR department is cooperating fully, providing documents that could be very important for my divorce because they realized the relationship and property purchase could bring serious consequences. After everything she went through with his father years ago, she is deeply disappointed in my husband for tarnishing the family's reputation. She is doing everything she can to support me, including helping my son, who is confused and sad and knows something is wrong, even if he doesn't fully understand. My son has begun seeing a child psychologist who specializes in parental alienation, and the therapist has been very helpful in identifying troubling patterns, how my husband and Sarah were influencing my son's feelings toward me while I was at work. They were subtly giving him the impression that Sarah was more of a maternal figure and that I wasn't present for him. It's heartbreaking to realize this happened. The therapist explained that if we didn't address it right away, it could lead to long-term emotional harm. I'm grateful we caught it early, so we could work to restore my son's understanding of our bond. Meanwhile, the trust fund investigation revealed even more problems, seemingly tied to the property. My husband made questionable investments and launched unapproved business ventures with Sarah without disclosing them. The more the trustee examined, the worse it became, and now they are working to completely revoke his access to the trust fund, which would severely impact his finances. That property purchase with Sarah was only the beginning. Numerous financial missteps violated the trust conditions. I thought I knew them well, but every new piece of information reminded me how little I truly understood. Shockingly, he risked our family and his career for this relationship. He has been phoning and texting me constantly, trying to minimize the situation, insisting that I'm exaggerating and that Sarah was just a close friend. But the evidence is undeniable, and I no longer believe him. I've stopped replying to his messages because he keeps deflecting blame, saying I was too focused on my career and not enough on him. But that's just another excuse. I know he made his own choices, and now he must live with the consequences. As for Sarah, I don't know what she's thinking, but I've heard she's been keeping a low profile, likely hoping this will blow over. But I doubt it will. Her career is also at risk, and with the financial investigation expanding, she's facing trouble too. Some of my husband's friends have contacted me to defend him, saying he's devastated about being away from his family. But I don't feel sympathy for her. She knew he was married and had a child, and she still chose to become involved. I've learned that people can surprise you in both good and bad ways. I never imagined that my mother-in-law would become such a steady presence for me, but she has. I'm not sure where all of this will lead, but I know I must protect myself and my son from the harm caused by my husband and Sarah. They don't understand that he brought this upon himself. They don't know how he behaved, and they don't know what evidence I have. My focus right now is on my son and his well-being. I want him to know I'm his mother, no matter what anyone else tries to suggest. I've been working hard to maintain stability for him, and I hope he'll eventually see the full truth. Even though the road ahead will be challenging, I'm determined to fight for my son's future, and I'm thankful to have you all for support. Update 3. My husband's life has completely unraveled, and the consequences of his choices are far more serious than I ever imagined. The law firm has completed its investigation, and both my husband and Sarah have been dismissed due to what they discovered, which went far beyond a personal relationship. The firm refused to overlook it because they had been misusing company resources, including confidential client information, to support their private ventures. This is a serious breach of ethics and has caught the attention of the State Bar Association, which has launched its inquiry. They could both lose their legal licenses as a result. Losing their jobs is one thing, but being barred from practicing law would be a permanent blow to their careers. Several clients whose data was mishandled have already been notified, and 2 are considering formal complaints. If they proceed, my husband and Sarah may face serious legal consequences. In addition, the issue with the trust fund has been settled, and my husband's access has been permanently terminated. The remaining funds will now be held for our son's future, but my husband no longer has any control, which means he's lost both his profession and his financial support system. After a thorough review, the trustees found he had violated the trust terms for more than a year, redirecting funds and using manipulative financial practices to conceal it. It's hard to believe how many layers of deception there were. As for Sarah, her challenges are far from over. I heard she moved out of our house and returned to her apartment, claiming it had water damage. That turned out to be untrue. It was just a cover story she and my husband created so she can stay with us. My son has been improving lately. He continues to see the child psychologist, and the sessions have been effective in helping him understand that none of this is his fault. The psychologist is helping undo the emotional confusion caused by my husband and Sarah. It hurt to watch my son struggle with that, but I'm relieved he's beginning to heal. He still has nightmares and some separation anxiety, but I'm hopeful that time and care will help. Legally, the divorce is moving faster than I expected, and my attorney has been incredible. She's confident I'll get primary custody, especially given all the evidence we've compiled about the emotional impact and misleading behavior. My husband tried to get our son to think of Sarah as his real mother, but that illusion is starting to break. There are still complexities in dividing finances, but my attorney is ensuring our son's future remains secure regardless of my husband's situation. I'm focused on protecting my child from any more fallout. My mother-in-law has continued to be a constant support. She's even helping me relocate to a better school district. She told me she doesn't want history to repeat itself, reflecting on her past, and she's generously helping me begin a new chapter. I'm incredibly grateful for her compassion and understanding. I didn't expect that confronting my husband that day would unravel so many hidden truths, but it did. What started as a betrayal exposed years of deception and professional misconduct. Now, I'm determined to show my son what a respectful and honest relationship looks like. I want to model those values for him every day. I've learned to trust my instincts. The documents I uncovered were startling, but deep down, the signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them. He says I ruined his life, but I don't see it that way. I didn't ruin anything. He made his own decisions. Dishonest ones. And now he's facing the results. Some people still tell me I'm being too tough, but I don't believe what he did was something we could just move on from. He didn't just betray me, he involved our son in the deception. That's something I can never forget. I stand by my decision to end this marriage, and I won't let anyone make me feel guilty for it. I'm ready to let go of the past and build a future where my son can grow up in a loving, secure, and respectful home.